Welcome to everybody watching today. I am so excited and delighted to be here with Paul Atherton of That Wall Street Guy. And that name really explains everything
it
about
pretty
you.
succinctly summarizes the organization and myself, because essentially the same thing, I suppose. But the Wall Street Guy,
When I met this man, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity, I was actually across in Canada in 2020, and I was sort of not able to get home at that time. And my financial guy, my investments guy, had retired. And I'd traded on the stock market for about 10 years, dabbling. And I thought to myself, I wish I could just go in and do it myself. I wish I had the time, but I knew it took a lot of time. And I wasn't great at it, but I thought, if I had the time, I could get better. And then I received an email from a lady that I didn't know well, and she said, I'd like to introduce you to Paul Atherton. He does investments. You might want to talk with him. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, because I'm looking for someone that could help me do that. And at that time, you weren't called That Wall Street Guy. You were just...
I think so. I think you're right, yeah.
You were just doing what you do.
Yeah.
And this would have been April in 2020, and I said, look, I'm overseas. I'll contact you when I get back. I was sort of like, whatever. I got back in October, I think it was, and you had said to me you'd keep in touch, and so you did email me, and it took me a little while to get in touch.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, the first Zoom call we had, Paul showed up on the meeting wearing, I couldn't see it was jeans, but I could see he just had a T-shirt on, and it wasn't a flash T-shirt, and I just thought, okay, I've never met an investment man that looked like this. And he was just home office, and I thought, okay, he's obviously just some man starting out in business. And so we began to talk.
Yeah.
You can tell them how it looked from your perspective, Paul.
Well, I think, and just to give the listeners some perspective here, I spent 25 years on Wall Street. And when I came back to Adelaide, we did that to raise my two young boys at the time. And I think to a degree, I shed my Wall Street sort of persona to a degree, in the sense that my whole career was wearing a suit and, expensive this, and I just came back and I just shed the whole thing. So any thought of wearing a suit was just too constraining, I say.
Yes.
And I do remember meeting yourself, but many other clients. And I remember once I said to my wife, I said, I probably should wear a suit. And she said, yeah, you probably should. And I said, nah. I just, I was really...
25 years
I just had this
is a long time.
roadblock in my mind. By the way, this is sort of changing now. So I'm feeling a little bit more...
I think because I certainly didn't grasp who you really were. And I guess I just... I'm not a fangirl or anything, but I've got to say, when I learnt the heights that you'd been to in Wall Street, like you weren't just on Wall Street for 25 years, you were high up in Wall Street. And I'll ask you to tell us that story in a minute about your journey to where you got to and how you got there. But when I really grasped who you were, and I think we saw that change in the meeting, when I suddenly realised, this man is not like a financial advisor, even though you were.
Right.
It's like this man knows at the coalface what investing in the stock market really looks like.
Yeah, correct. And so in that meeting, again, I'm wearing, and this is not an uncommon situation. I would say pretty much 100% of the situation turns up in a not quite what you would expect.
No.
But then it's what I say and what I talk about and how I talk about the markets and the global markets and investing and a little bit about my history. And somewhere along that journey, for everyone, the light turns on. And I could see it with you, Di, because it was so dramatic. It felt like this, bomb had gone off. You were, looking around and looking at, and then eventually, all of it started coming together. I don't know. You get to a critical mass of information, and you just looked at me. And then when we turned, which is, I think, probably unique to yourself, we went from vagaries to absolute focus in on me. And I was like, oh, okay, she's got it.
And importantly so, Paul asked me fairly early on, well, what are some of your financial goals? And I thought, let's see. Because I've spoken with coaches where I've told them my goals and they're like, well, you've got to be a bit realistic. So when I said to Paul, and to that day, I plucked a figure and I said, I want to make 2 million in my, and he just went, yep.
Yeah.
As if I'd said something like 20,000. It was, he didn't bat an eyelid.
And I think, you can see that's going to happen. So this is a great thing because people have such a very closed view of what can be achieved in investing.
Yes.
And they have a closed view because they really have not been exposed to what's achievable and what's workable and
what is possible
and what is actually possible within the investing world. And I know what is possible, and I know I can do it, and I knew I would do it.
Yes.
And I can already see with clients that are sort of like yourself, longer term, like we're well on that path.
Yeah.
So we know what we're going to achieve.
Tell us, if you will, briefly, I love your storytelling and could listen to you speak all day. Tell us your story as to how you got to where you were in Wall Street. And I guess I want us to hear this because for me, it underpins you're so sturdy in what you know because of your 25 years.
Yes, right. So I grew up in Adelaide, a little town in small country town. Sometimes it's been referred to, but it's a smaller city in Australia. Lovely city. I just love Adelaide. And I grew up here. I went to school here. I went to university here, and I studied engineering. And I graduated with honours, first-class honours, and went straight into the steel industry. And it was great because I really instantly got to flex my engineering skills where we were building big structures and I was a big part of that. And you could see what you've achieved and what you created right in front of you. But I realized reasonably quickly that wasn't my future. And I had a strong desire to continue my study. And the place to do that, certainly at the time, early 90s, was the US. So I applied for the US, applied for about 7 universities, and they all came back with offers. But one university in Boston gave me a full scholarship. And I remember going, and goes, well, looks like I'm going to Boston. So I signed the form, sealed it, posted it back off, and went, oh, I haven't told anyone. Oh. So this is some of the impetuousness of I think I was 20 years old at the time.
Yeah.
And then I started telling people, and literally, people were in favor of me and very supportive, but they clearly, for everyone, I'd lost my mind. Because, and they said, do you not have a good job? You not like it? No, I really like my job. And so do you not paid enough? And I'm like, oh no, I'm paid pretty well. Would you hate your boss? And I'm like, no, I love my boss. Would you not like where you live? And I'm like, oh, I was in sunny Queensland and it was beautiful weather. And I'm like, no, I really, so why are you going? And I'm like, and I couldn't explain it. No. Was the ultimate answer, other than this was a very deep desire. So deep was the desire that if to not do it would feel like I was trapped.
Yes.
And I usually describe it's like being in a straitjacket, and I needed to escape out of the straitjacket. So, but my mum was the most upset because she said, "You'll go over there, you'll meet a girl, fall in love, and then you won't come back." And I said, "Mum, that's not going to happen." I went over to study mathematics, probability, and engineering, and I said, "Mathematics, keep all the girls away." So I packed everything. I sold every single thing I had except for clothes on my back and a laptop. Yeah. Traveled over to the US, just a young kid. Met a girl, fell in love, and so it turns out mums really know what they're talking about. And my lovely wife, who you know very well, she's a New Yorker, and she said, "Well, I don't care what you're doing. We're doing it in New York." So we married, I moved to New York, and I didn't know it at the time, but Wall Street was hoovering up mathematicians, and I walked in with the front door with an advanced degree. a math degree, and I got hired very quickly. So I cut my teeth on the trading floor, on an emerging markets trading floor. I got a real deep understanding of the global flow of money, because countries would rise and fall based on that flow, and a really deep understanding of risk and risk management. And I was working with some of the biggest and most influential players in Wall Street. And if I name them, a lot of people would know them, but I won't. But suffice to say, it was a fantastic career, 25 years. But we knew, both my wife and I knew, that we wanted to raise our two boys in Adelaide.
And you didn't stay on the trading floor? Like your 25 years wasn't the same?
No. So I was on the trading floor for, let's say, half my career. And then I moved to more senior management. So risk management, taking care of complex risk, making sure that the expression is, you want to make sure the senior guys or senior risk managers want to make sure the company or the investment bank doesn't blow up. And a blow up means a series of trades, and it's happened before, where these positions are placed by the bank and it bankrupts the company. Think about the GFC was entirely that. Lehman was just loaded up with bad debt, and so they blew up. My job was to make sure that didn't happen.
Yeah, I must say, when I've had my first conversation with you, that was one thing that I was impressed with, having studied the share market a little bit in trading, was your risk management, the way you spoke about that, because that's really important.
And that's the main thing. So my whole thrust is risk management. So understanding where your risk, and layering risk, and making sure, and all within that framework, you can get enormously incredible returns, but you can do it in a very safe way.
Yes.
But again, you've got to know global markets, global flow, countries that are doing well or not well, where the risks lay. You've got to understand the difference between a pullback or a market correction versus a genuine disruption, and so on and so on. And I've lived it 25 years, so I got this very deep feeling for, it's so obvious to me. It's like reading a traffic light, it's right there. It says go.
Yeah. And that comes through when you speak with, for me, that came through very strongly. Yeah. Yeah.
And the idea for that Wall Street guy was to grab this experience. So, as you know, I discovered financial advice by accident. I didn't know there was even this group of people doing this. And upon discovery of the types of advice that were being handed down and the way it was structured, and the lack, I think, personally, the lack of risk management, the lack of understanding, I just had to change it. I was and remain very driven to change the paradigm.
Yeah.
So I'm taking what would normally be the top tier of finance and investment bank and bringing that to the...
So now we get to the nitty gritty, really, of why I wanted you to be on this podcast, to speak to the everyday mum and dad, people who are out there working, putting money into investment, and like I was, had been used to not getting huge returns. But it was almost like, I've got a saving plan going on. And when I met you, I now call Paul the Robin Hood of investment, because I do feel like you are bringing so much to what I would have called the little guy.
Yeah.
But they're the people that you are raising up. Like, I'm one of them. So when I met Paul we had our conversation in March, something like that, of 21. And I, crazy as it might seem, that was my first meeting of Paul. We had quite a long Zoom meeting.
That's right.
And I just said, well, how do I transfer everything over to you? My whole superannuation, my whole investment portfolio, I'm like, it's yours. And I didn't actually ask anyone or tell anyone. I just did it based on the feeling I had. I mean, I jumped on that call not really knowing anything about you. And I jumped off the call going, great, I'm so glad I've met you. Let's go. And 3 months later, you sent me a report. Once I'd been established, set up with you, and you sent my first report 3 months later. I had to sit down. I'm just like, is this a joke? Like, is this almost like a welcome bonus or something?
Yeah, that's right.
I was very surprised.
Yeah. I think one thing to be clear with is the money doesn't go to me are around, it goes to a third-party platform, so you still own it as a client.
Yeah. And
It's
can
just
see
that,
it, which is
and you
good.
see it, and all my clients, I always tell people, don't watch it every day because it'll drive you mad.
Yeah.
Then everyone totally ignores me and watches it every day. Nevertheless, there's a public platform that is owned in Australia. It's extremely well controlled. And my approach to it is so they're called wrap accounts, which we use and the industry uses, and it's very well used, and more so now than it was 5 years ago when I started. So it's for advisors. But a wrap account is, you can do for super, but you can do for outside of super. But I say, think of it like a platform that accesses the world of investing.
Yes.
So you have, for example, it's like Amazon is to books, right? So Amazon doesn't care if you buy a Harry Potter book or a gardening book.
Yeah.
It just gives you access to the world of books.
It's a platform you can use.
It's a platform.
Yeah.
It's an access point. And so we use that. I use that for my clients.
So, Paul, I find you very good to work with.
Yeah.
What do you find are the major roadblocks for people? Because I just want to really shout your name from the road. You know, most people that know me have heard of you because I can't keep quiet about
it's
you.
the second word out of your mouth.
Yeah, it's like this man knows what he's doing, and you must at least talk with him.
Yeah.
What do you find stops most people?
Yeah. So I think the two main elements for this. The first one is it seems too good to be true.
Yes.
And we have a mutual friend that her returns were, orders of magnitude higher than she'd ever experienced, orders of magnitude than her friends. And she was telling a friend.
Yes.
And she said, I just don't believe you.
No.
And ironically, you're the one who pushed her, because she sat on the sideline for a year, I think, for quite a while.
And now, we all know
she's done absolutely phenomenal. So, and I'm really pleased. And you were instrumental in that, but that's a barrier.
Yeah.
So people think, and she knew me for a year. She knew me very well, and she knew me being. So I understand that there is that barrier of too good to be true. The other one is people think I wouldn't be interested. And I've had this.
As in, you wouldn't be interested.
I wouldn't be
in working
interested.
With them.
It's too small an account.
Yeah.
And that's virtually never true.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I love working with smaller accounts
Yeah.
because they're the kind of ones where you can double, triple very quickly.
Yeah.
And I've got just such a history of working with clients that we've been able to. One client I always talk about. And she said, look, it's game over for me. And she was in her 30s.
Right.
And I said, just not true. And she goes, well, would you even look at a client like me? And I said, absolutely. And I said, just stick with, we'll work on a structure and a strategy. And we did that strategy. Yeah. And in 2 years, she's doubled her money.
And I do love that because I meet a lot of women in particular who have separated later in life, and they didn't think they'd ever be in that position, and they're afraid for what does this mean for them financially. And you know, when you spoke with me, the words that came out of your mouth that made me feel so good was, "You've got nothing to worry about. You're in very good shape." Yeah. And I thought, oh, that's such
literally the
refreshing.
most common thing out of my mouth. Yeah. When so a lot of my clients are women in finance. Turns out women like to talk. So men on average, I don't know if I can make these broad brushstrokes, but men on average tend to go, that's my guy, I want to share my big earnings at a barbecue, but I will never give the number away. Yeah. Women just share it like crazy. So I've been growing exponentially, and a large part of that is because I've been transforming people's lives. And you know what? The funny thing is, there are a number of people have come to me and they said, look, I tried 3 or 4 other advisors, but they wouldn't touch me. And then, wouldn't you know, in 12 months, they get an inheritance of millions. You know, this has happened so many times. Yeah. And I just laugh because I know of all these groups of people that have just turned them away. Yeah. But my whole passion is to transform people. irrespective of that.
You know, and you're talking about people think it's too good to be true. And I think fear, I deal a lot
Yeah.
with fear in people. You know, they're not going after what they want in life because they are afraid, like, oh, what if this happens, or what if this doesn't happen?
Yeah.
You face that a lot. I face that a lot with our clients. And I move to you based on intuition. And you and I talk about intuition a lot. It's just that feeling.
Yeah.
Like you said, you went to the US, you couldn't explain to people why. You just
that was
had the feeling that was right.
Yeah.
I know you've lived a lot like that, which puts you in just a place of your own for me, because I know that you go by your intuition a lot. Can you tell us just one story of where you've used your intuition? And
I let me expand on this story. So going to the US was a pure paradigm break for me, and driven purely by my intuition. And I think I've been very lucky in life that I've been able to notice the difference of when I fear something versus where I've intuitively really want to do it. And when it's intuitive, you usually can't explain it.
no.
And as Steve Jobs said, I think in one of his speeches, he said you join the dots in reverse, not going forward. So, but the big one was I developed a pretty good reputation. I was trading extremely well in the emerging markets team, and as happens, like a lot of industries, believe it or not, Wall Street's quite small in many ways. And a friend of mine who worked downtown was like, come over. We would need to understand your risk, the way you manage risk, and the way you position. And I could see you in this job, and we'd really love to have you over. So I interviewed with everyone, and sure enough, got the offer. It was phenomenal. In fact, it was so much money. My wife and I started shopping for brownstones in Brooklyn, and there were these beautiful places, and so we're like, okay, it looks like life's making a bit of a change here. And so everything made sense. Big money, great career, everything to do with friends. And I remember on a weekend, I woke up and I was like, I don't want to take the job. And I really don't want to do it. And I couldn't really explain it, but every ounce of me was going, this is not what I want. And then I knew there was another offer out to move to London. And it was more, let's say, they call it a quantitative job or a technical role. Not nowhere near the same amount of money, but it was sort of directionally, I thought, that's really what I want to do.
Okay.
So I had to run that by Angela, my wife, and that's quite a thing to say, because I couldn't explain why. I couldn't say what the driver was. And the money was significantly less. And bless her, she just said, okay, if that's what you want to do, let's do it. And then within no time, we had packed up, left New York, and we were in London. And what I tell people is the job was, the time was, we moved in June of 2001, and the job was in one of the Twin Towers. And if I'd taken the job, I would have been up in the Twin Towers on September 11, no question. So we were in London. And on the morning of September 11, I was on the phone to my friend. And on the phone to him, and we, on the very morning, and again, we were talking about the sorts of things they wanted to hire me for, which is the risk, how to think about it, what I would do, lots of this type of stuff. And then he said to me while we were talking, he goes, gosh, he says, there's all this screaming going on. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. He goes, you know what, Paul? I'll tell you what, I'll call you back. And I said, okay, no worries. So I hung up, and I remember I went back downstairs to the trading floor.
In London?
In London, this is in London. And I walked out, and the whole floor is normally a din of noise, like there's just lots going on, and it was completely silent. And that was something that didn't really hit me until retrospect. I just walked back in, And I turned around, and on the wall were all the plasma screens, and I see one of the towers, and I just stand there, staring at it, blinking, going, and I remember all I verbally said was, "Oh my God, all my friends are there. Oh my God, my friends are there." And I remember there was this Irish lady. You might as well look up, images of Irish ladies, because she was red-haired, and she said, "Are you okay?" And I sort of came to, and she said, and because the tower went down, and I was just in shock, and she said, "Are you okay? Do you need a hug?" And I said, "Yes." And then the klaxon comes on our place in London, and they empty our trading floor. So we all got to go home. And I go home, and my wife's also, she's a teacher, but she went home early. And it was very, very spooky because everything was quiet. You see pubs full of people just staring at the television, And I went in, and I got it in my head. I just said, I've got to go over to New York, because I wanted to be my friends, And Angela says, "You can't go to New York." I said, "I'm going to New York." And she said, "But you can't." And I said, I've got to go. And she said, "No, but there are no flights. They've shut everything down." So now I just go, "Well, I've got to find a way," I said, "because I should have been there." And Angela said, "Well, then you'd be dead too." And I said, I just couldn't argue with it. So I watched the tower go down. I knew my friends. It wasn't just the friend I was on the phone with. It was all the other people there. I knew everyone from the PA, the receptionist, to the senior managers. And so I wrote down a list of the people I needed to call. I wrote down all their names. And my penance to myself, I said, my penance for not being in the tower was I was going to go through every person and call them. And so I took the piece of paper the next morning, and my friend that I was first going to call up, I knew I had her number.
So the wife of your friend.
The wife of my friend. So I had her number. So I said, well, she's number one. And I got the others, and I knew I'd get most by the end because I would ask. But she was the first. So I'd called it up. And I went into the same office that I called with him on the phone. And I call her, and I get her on the phone. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, the first words out of my mouth were, "I'm so sorry." And she's like, "Oh my gosh, Paul, it's absolutely terrible. And it's a bit chaos here, and we're trying to work things out." And I said, "Is there anything I can do?" And she said, well, I don't think so, but, thank you for saying that. And but if there is anything, I'll certainly let you know. And I go, and I said, I loved him like a brother. And she said, "Oh, he would really like to hear that. Would you want to have a chat to him?" And I went, "What do you mean?" She said, "Oh, no, he made it out." And they all made it out. And I went from, I'd lost all these people, all these friends, and I was going to go down my list. I can't tell you how devastating it was to think that I had a dozen people and partners to call through. And then I found out that they all made it out. And it's completely changed me as a person. Like, I think we all change from various inputs, but that made life very different for me.
Yeah.
And definitely underlined that life is too short. I'm really going to just pour all my energy and passion to helping people. Yeah. And I like to think that I've been able to achieve that.
Yeah.
So that was, literally, and I remember my wife saying "but you'd be dead too." Yeah. And I was...
So that morning that you woke up and thought, I don't know why, but I'm not going to take this job. how grateful you must have all been that you followed.
And it's just something I didn't until retrospect.
Yeah.
And by the way, the subsequent decisions to move, for example, moving back to Adelaide was completely mad. I could not justify that to anybody.
No.
And I got a lot of pressure to head back and a lot of pressure not to go.
Yeah.
Again, that was an intuition thing. And in retrospect, it was such a great decision.
Oh, well, and I, for one, and I know there's many lining up behind me to say how grateful we are that you do what you do.
Yeah.
Not just because of the experience you've had, but like you said, you've got a real heart for people.
Yeah.
And that coupled with your experience makes it just gold.
Yeah, and it's got to be, I've got to say, it's been an accidental but wonderfully rewarding second career. And I know now, I'm like, so I had a feeling, I did have this feeling that I'm going, oh my gosh, all the knowledge and skills that I've got from 25 years, from some of the most impressive individuals that I learned from. And I said, it's all going to die in Adelaide. And now it's not.
How wrong you've been.
And now I'm like, I'm being.
I do love the story you tell, and I know we'll finish up here, but the story you tell when you came home and you decided what you were going to do here in Adelaide, and you walked through the house and said to Angela, she was there chopping up some.
Oh yeah. So this is a great, it's so funny. It's a great sort of expose on our relationship, or the fact that she knows me so well. But I went to see in-person advisors before I started it up, because I had no idea this class of people even existed. I'm like, what's their expertise? Where did they study? How did they know this stuff? So I saw 14 in the end, and I was so horrified. And the 14th, I just got back into home, and this, again, like a straitjacket. I just I can't take it anymore.
Yes.
I said, I can't take it. I said, I'm going to start my own company, and I'm going to change the industry.
Yeah.
And she was cutting vegetables, and she went, oh, shit. So if you imagine I think it was like 3 years before that, I was a very, shall we say, relaxed.
Yes.
And when the machine went on, we've been
you've been going for it. You're such a passionate man about what you do, and I love that. Yeah. One of your sayings, which I love, is making money is the easy part. And I don't think I'd ever heard anyone say it quite like you do. With such, it's just like picking apples is easy. That's, it's just something so...
I use the analogy for me is it's like making a ham sandwich.
Yes.
But it's like making a ham sandwich and everyone around you was impressed.
Yeah.
So you go, oh, look, I butter here, and they go, wow. And then I put the ham on top, and they go, oh my God, I never thought about that. And then I put it on top, and I got it. And they're like, God, you've just made a ham sandwich.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it feels for me. But I think when a little bit of time, you start to understand that indeed making money is just, there are so many opportunities.
And do you know what I love about and why I think we get along so well is because I'm all about helping people create a life they love.
Yeah.
And a lot of what holds people back is, well, I don't have the money.
Right.
Now, we both know that's actually not the bulk of what holds people back, really. But you get rid of that for them. Yeah. And once they then understand, financially I'm secure, now what?
Now what,
And so what do I want to do with my life? And so for any of you out there, or maybe you know someone, just like I had someone put me in touch with Paul, we've got our websites listed at the bottom of this podcast.
Yeah.
A call link for me if you'd like to get in touch with me. But we together definitely are invested in helping you to create a life that you absolutely love. And money is no barrier either. So let that sink in. And
ultimately it all comes down to a choice.
Yeah.
Because you want to do it or not.
Yeah, and deciding, isn't it?
Deciding,
Yeah.
So with the issue, I think, too, is there's a bit of one of the biggest barriers for us as people tends to be paradigm shifts.
Yes.
And paradigm shifts are not intellectually big, they're not huge, they're not difficult, but because it's a paradigm shift, people don't like doing it.
Yeah.
And the paradigm shift is, why does a Wall Street guy want to help me?
Yeah.
Or is this real? And yes,
Yeah.
it's real. Yes, we've got a very big
Yeah.
and substantial and very successful client base. And I'm just like, guys, it can happen to you too. We
Yeah.
can absolutely turn people's lives around. And to your point a bit earlier, I say this all the time. Your retirement is now sorted.
Yes.
Like you're not having to worry about that.
Yeah.
So it does build the challenge of, now what?
Yeah. Changes the way you show up every day. So thank you so much for being here.
No
I
problem.
love chatting with you, and no doubt
Yeah.
we'll have you back again.
Great.
And thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you on the next DiLive podcast.